What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another week on the Finding Direction podcast. And this week, I'm sitting down with Maura Sweeney. And Maura, she is a leader in the movement of happiness. And already from hearing that, I'm sure you can guess that you want to definitely tune into all of this episode because you're going to learn how to be happier. All right. Maura, she is a writer. She's a speaker. She is also a host of her very own podcast. And on this week's episode, a few of the things that we talk about, sometimes you actually need to jump out of the plane with no parachute. Not literally, but obviously figuratively. Why sometimes you need to take that leap, not have a parachute. And that's the step that you need to take to find this next direction in your life. We also talk about how can you listen to yourself better? How can you listen to yourself more effectively? And how can you tune into the internal conversations that are going to move your life in the correct direction that you want to go? And also, one of the things we talk about, of course, is how do you be happier? How do you increase your happiness levels? We talk about all of those things, a lot more on this episode. So we are going to dive right into this week's episode. If you haven't yet, please make sure you subscribe, leave us a comment or a review. And if you have a friend that you know needs to be happier, this, my friends, is the episode to send them. So hit that share button. And other than that, we are going to dive in. Here we go. Maura Sweeney, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to have you here.
Hi, Stu. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Absolutely. Me too. And so to dive in and give our audience kind of an idea of who you are, where you came from, I'd love it if you could start off and just fill us in on what did life look like for little Maura as you were growing up?
I love to tell the story, and I'm so glad you're asking. Little Maura grew up a long time ago, and anybody who's watching me could tell, because I could probably be your mother. But I grew up right outside of New York City with a name I didn't like. Everything about the way in which I was groomed, I didn't feel comfortable with, didn't like. But I'll tell you, and let me tell you why, because I was brought up to be a lawyer. That meant turtlenecks, it meant navy blue suits. I mean, this was to be smart. You're going to go to law school. Yeah. But when I was a small child, I used to dream about flying in airplanes around the world. And if I couldn't fly around the world, meeting people of every single culture, it didn't matter to me that I couldn't speak the language. I was out in the backyard digging a hole, hoping I could meet my friends on the other side of the earth in China. So I was these kids that I wanted to meet and greet everybody. And to me, they would be like long lost relatives. I'll give you two other things, and I think they're really key for where you're going today in your interview. I mentioned that I was supposed to be an attorney. My grandfather was a lawyer. And I would go to his office as a real small child, and I would hear him with his clients. But instead, I used to sit beside his legal secretary, who was real old school, cat eye glasses. And she was so old school, she had a traditional typewriter. And I'd watch her type. And she had duplicates and triplicates. And I said to her, "What are you doing?" Now, I couldn't even read yet, Stu. And she said to me, "We're writing down words and ideas that people are going to read and talk about and think about and change their minds." Now, I didn't even know how to read. I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to be able to communicate with people.
Interesting.
Now, isn't that funny? And then there was a third thing. And again, you could say, I could be your mom. I was in kindergarten the year that JFK was assassinated. But I'm telling you, JFK lived so large in our household. I knew everything about the family. I knew what his desires were. It was not ask what your country could do for you. It was ask what you could do for your country. This little person. And you know what, Stu? All those things I just mentioned to you, traveling to meet all friends around the world, being a communicator, and third, this whole idea of leadership that got everybody involved in a vision, and everybody, small kids like me, wanted to be a part of it. That was my childhood, and I still relate to that today when I speak with audiences everywhere, because it was really giving me like the germinating pieces of what things were really important to me, what things got me excited, what things got me curious. And it took me many years to get there because I ended up in law school. And I
Right.
left Los Angeles thinking, I'm dying.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, totally. And we'll get into all of that because I definitely have some questions. Just, obviously there's a lot of things we're going to get to. But one thing I'd be curious, and I think that's so interesting, even as we look at like the early parts of your life and how it was almost like a foreshadowing of what you wanted to do later in your life. But it's easy. Like they say, you can connect the dots backwards. Sometimes it's harder to do it forward, right? When you look back, you go, oh, this all makes sense that I'm doing what I'm doing today. For someone, let's say, that's like lost, and I know in your story, you were kind of following the route that someone else paved for you. How would you say someone can go back and maybe like pick apart and look at some of the things from their early age to maybe predict what they should do next in their life?
Thanks for asking, because I've had several people, even at leadership conferences, ask me about that. And it sounds simple, but I would tell people, and anybody who's listening today could do this after we're done. I would say, put your hand on your heart, close your eyes, and breathe just slowly. And ask yourself, where was I when I was having a good time, when I was having fun? And just as your eyes are closed, and the reason why your hand is over your chest or your heart, let's say, is because it gets things out of the brain where we've been trained to be a certain type person and move back into your soul. And people have told me this over and over again. I say to them, all right, whenever you find yourself smiling, stop right there. Figure out where you were, who you were with, what you were doing, what the scents were like, what your imagination was doing. And there's always threads there in terms of what you could pull out of your childhood and let's say energize today. And it's never going to look like it did when you're 5 years old or 7 years old, but you cannot believe how many ways you could take those threads and start pursuing them with whatever you've got in front of you and build them until eventually you create something out of, I would say, an idea, a vision, a feeling, and really something that comes out of your soul that's really looking for expression.
Yeah, so true. So beautiful too. And so let's say then, we keep going down the road of your life. And as you mentioned, you were kind of like groomed in a sense through your family, like you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to do this. And so kind of walk us through the moment of your life when you started to realize like, this is not what I want to do with my life.
Okay. Well, I was at Boston College. I was a political science major. I was even chosen for the vaunted internship to work for Senator Teddy Kennedy, who was JFK's brother. And I did take it. I was offered a full-time job, and I thought, well, no, I'm going to go to law school because this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
We went through a year and a half of law school. I even had an offer to work to intern at a great law firm, and I didn't take it. It was like across the street from our law school. And instead I was doing something else part-time. It was like I was running away from it. But my moment of truth came when I was past the halfway mark. So I was in the fourth semester, just started, and I thought, oh my gosh, it's now downhill. Now I'm like in this thing deep. And back then, if you got your law degree and didn't practice law, people thought there was something wrong with you. So it was a one-way track. Right. And I thought, I was living in New Jersey, and I always wanted to live in Florida. But I remember thinking, I'm going to have to do this for 40 years and then finally tell my family, all right, I'm going to retire, move to Florida, and do what I want to do. But I couldn't get out of my chair one morning to get in the car and drive myself to law school. I literally, and I was like probably 115 pounds, very slender. So it's not like the weight of the world.
Right.
I felt like I was, and I could see the picture every day as the days went on, trying to be what somebody else wanted me to be. I felt like I had this very heavy bag. It almost looked like Santa's bag, the big heavy one. Yeah. And it had another me in it. And every day I'd get out of bed and I'd put it on my back and go through the day and go through these boring books because I was really a people. And one day I literally couldn't get out of the chair. And then my husband, I was married young. My husband came home from work. He said to me, aren't you supposed to be at school? And I said to him, I opened my mouth, stew, nothing came out. And I was like, whoa, I'm in trouble now. I got to the point where I could no longer carry a false identity. And so that was my Waterloo moment. Yeah. When I left, I've got to find what's going to give me life, because I realized there was I would say what started out as a torch and was feeling like a candle that was about to get snuffed. And I'm thinking, I'm 23 years old. I should be out there living life and conquering dragons. And that was really when it hit me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting when you share that story. One of the stories that pops into my head is someone was telling me this gentleman who lives in Fiji. And kind of in the story, this guy's like walking through Fiji. He's visiting Fiji and he sees this guy that lives there and he starts talking to him. And eventually as they start talking, the guy from Fiji just starts laughing because he's the guest is complimenting the guy that lives there. He's like, it's so beautiful and it's so amazing. And the Fijian, if that's the correct word for people that live in Fiji, he's laughing and the guy's like, well, why are you laughing? And he's like, people spend their whole life saying, they come visit here and they say, I'm going to work and I'm going to do all this stuff. And then eventually one day I'm going to move here and I'm going to have this beautiful, peaceful, amazing life. And he goes, I just moved here now versus waiting the 40 years like you were saying. Right? He's like, people do so many things to ultimately get to this place of joy and happiness. He's like, I'm just going to do it now. You know what I mean? And it's this thought of like, why wait to someday be happy because of expectations of others or whatever it be? Like, why not choose to do that today?
I was just about to, you took the words right out of my mouth. It's that you can choose it today and you can be happy today. That's true. That's true.
And so like, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say something else you said, which is so true, because I am the ambassador of happiness. And I started out very unhappy, which is why I had to pursue that. But so many people, not everyone, but so many people feel so constrained by society, by expectations. In my case, it was kind of a family thing. But beyond that, it could be whatever we're watching on social media. It's whatever's being the now thing to do. And it's great if it fits you. But if it doesn't, you're probably going to do a poorer job at it. You won't have the energy. You won't have the enthusiasm. And it's not easy, though, pioneering your own way, because there's nobody with you holding your hand and saying, get on that path, let's go together. You are literally creating your own journey. But it's worth it.
Yeah. So I'm curious. I mean, it's kind of a beautiful segue to like the next thing that I want to ask you is it's like you went from this place of realizing this is not me. I'm fourth quarter semester, trimester, however those work. But you're realizing like this isn't what I want to do, but everybody on the outside, like it's going to be a conversation with the family, right? We're kind of going in that route. And I'm curious, like, how did you go through this process? And then more importantly, when you came out to the other side, how did you begin to pioneer kind of the next path for your life?
Well, I'm going to tell you, it was very frightening for me. It really was. When you said groomed, there's, some people are prepared for something, others are groomed. And mine was, this is what you're doing. I will tell you, I had an out, because even though my family wanted me to go to law school, I was paying for it. So as much as I felt the guilt of dropping or leaving this plan that they had for me, they couldn't say, we spent all that money on you. I was the one that was taking student loans. And I actually think, Stu, in the back of my head, I had that as an out because I didn't want to carry any guilt. So that was part of it. The other part of it was like, okay, I was always like this achiever. I was people, I didn't compete with others, but I was always looking to be my next version of the best self of Maura.
I love that.
It's like, now what am I now? I'm like this failure who's rudderless. And it was so scary. But, like you go through life and you just cast your net out. And you're going to be putting it out there until something hits, and then you find your groove. And you may find this strange, but maybe not. The time I was young, I was always inspired by other people that would make changes in the world, or people whose lives could influence and positively affect other people's. And as much as what I'm doing today is an international speaker and podcaster and person who's on interviews, I knew that I couldn't do what I was called to do until I was older. And think about this. I grew up in an economy like if you were 30, you were old. It's not like that today. But I knew what I was called to do in life. And it was really something on the inside of me. I knew I needed a lot of life experience. So I did everything that was in front of me. I moved to Florida. I was offered one job and I didn't even want it. It was in sales in a telecom firm. But as it turned out, I, within 3 months, was in management, and then I had the top office in the country, which meant that I even though it wasn't an industry I was interested in, I used that time, Stu, to become an excellent, I would say, finder of good talent, a builder of teams. I had the top. We had the top office in the country, and Tampa at the time was not that big, so we beat out New York, LA, all these other cities. So I learned at that point how to work with people, how to develop great teams, how to find people's skills and talents, and put them together into something that, when you put all the pieces together, it would be bigger than it would be as the sum of its parts. And then I was, very adept at promoting people into leadership and beyond that. So I also learned, how do you have success in a sales organization? And I was never like one of those tough people that fuck with people. And I remember that was where I learned how to encourage people to be their best in a positive way, rather than the negative. There's a lot of leadership that's like that.
Yeah.
And so it became my laboratory to find out what works in creating success for other people and a successful environment and a happy one. And I think that was the energy that caused us all to do so well. Then I'll tell you that I had another part of my life where I was a homeschooling mom. Another job in my lifetime, I would have thought, this is the most antisocial thing. You got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
But our daughter loved it. My husband and I had a company, and I was working there part-time, and we loved to travel. So I had a part of that. And I grew a lot during that time period. And then you're waiting for the third part. Our daughter at 13 decides instead of high school, she wants to go to college. So she started college locally. She didn't need my help anymore. And I thought, what's my next act?
She started college at 13?
She got all of her high school and college courses started at 13. So, and I was ready to say, all right, what am I going to do now?
Right.
And that was it, Stu. I actually started having dreams at night because I was very happy to serve other people, develop other people, even as a leader. But I wasn't one of those people that says, here's my face. Well, believe it or not, Stu, I was having dreams in the middle of the night, like getting thrown out of a closet to say, you're going where you're supposed to go. And I was doing little things. I started learning how to dance, another thing I always wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I was pathetic at it. I failed the program. People used to laugh at me, not with me. I almost destroyed an on-stage performance, but I kept up with it because I knew my insides needed it. So the bottom line is that from that, and I did a lot of travel, a lot of my own personal research, I became a writer. I wrote for some other publications for, I think, 5 years. I had my own column on Huffington Post, and I would write, what is it that makes us happy from the inside?
Right.
I felt like people that were really following what made them happy. And then I started getting invitations to speak on radio shows, and then I got invitations to speak abroad. And let me tell you, my first international opportunity to speak came in the very same place I actually had a vision in, and it was Dubrovnik, Croatia. We were on a family trip. I just got out of the water.
Nice.
And I was with my daughter or something, and I'm standing on the water side. And all of a sudden, a question comes to me. What would you do if you were given the world's biggest microphone? Now, I didn't have a chance to answer it because I could see the answer. There was a huge microphone that showed up in front of me from the water all the way up to the sky. And the answer came, I'd report good news. And the news I was reporting, I mean, it's like in a split second.
We need more of that.
Well, this is I know we do. I'm working on it, Stu.
Yeah.
So anyway, this quick vision I was actually saw in a split second. I was telling the story about a black guy and a white guy who don't even exist, and how they did something together and they were working like brothers. And what happened is that you couldn't even see me with the microphone. Everybody was so drawn to the top story of this microphone, they all kept moving toward the microphone. It was a story that brought about unity, happiness, collaboration, and everybody felt good. Now, fast forward. The first opportunity I was ever given, or invitation, I should say, was in none other than Dubrovnik, Croatia, at a hotel that didn't even exist when I was there. It was the El Presidente Hotel. They had people from 8 countries. It was a leadership conference, former war-torn area. They heard my voice. They knew I was trustworthy. They said to me, we need somebody who could talk about happiness because we've got so many people that struggle working well together. So you talk about like all the stars maybe coming together. I'm not going to say it was easy, everything that I've done, because it's kind of awkward being a 50 woman that says, I think I'm going to put my face, on a TV someplace. And I don't have a background in media, but I followed what I loved. I was extremely and am extremely passionate about people, about bringing the world together. And then I've probably now spoken in maybe a dozen countries and dozens of times.
Yeah. I love it. And for real. And so two things I kind of want to point out that I think are fascinating and just like the honest truth sometimes is, if we go kind of back into your story, when you left being a lawyer, you said, I'm going to move to Florida, is more or less you jumped out of a plane with no parachute. If we put this in an analogy, right? And it's like, as much as it's nice to have a backup plan and, do this with a secure, safe path, and you go, I got this thing and, I can transition nice and smoothly. It really is sometimes that if you can't see what the next thing is going to be, but in your heart that you're not doing the thing you're supposed to do, sometimes it does take that leap of faith, that jumping out of a plane with no parachute, because when you jump, the right thing will find you. You know what I mean? If you're intentional about it.
You know what I would say, and I'll add something further to that. We live in a world, and it's not so much that way anymore, but people were very security conscious. And right now with COVID, everything, security is pretty much gone out the window. But sometimes when we are so secure, it makes leaving harder. And not having a backup, because when I left law school, it was like, there is no backup plan. So the only way I could go was forward. And that's what I did. And I used everything, even if it wasn't, let's say, my ideal. I would look at it and think, what in this experience is developing me as a person? What things give me joy? And I would focus in on those. And I would really encourage everybody else in my offices to do the same thing, because that's where we find purpose. And that's where we also feel like we're valued in an organization, because we find our talents and we know some of those unique spaces we could fill maybe that other people can't. And then it gives us more confidence. And then we carry a greater energy. And then we become people who sort of inspire other people to do the same and follow what makes them happy.
Yeah. I love it. It's kind of like a spiral effect, right? When you step into the thing that you're supposed to be doing, you want to do more of it. You make more impact. Therefore, you want to do more of it again. And you kind of go in this like beautiful spiral. And so I guess a question I have for you, maybe one could even say the $1 million question, is how would you say people, obviously you're a huge advocate of happiness, and I am as well, like pursue living a life that you're happy with, that excites you, rather than some people say, well, pursue a life where you're successful or you're financially crushing it. It's like, there's a lot of people that are financially doing very well, but that are not happy. But I think there's not as many people that are happy that have some of the other bad, you know what I mean? Like happiness trumps success, I would say. And so I'm curious for you, like how would you say people increase their happiness? Like you've been studying this, you're a huge advocate of it. How do we be happier?
Increase it. One of the biggest things I say, because everybody is always tapped in and tied in to whatever's going on their iPhone, right? They're always paying attention, but very rarely do we unplug and find out what we think and what we want and what makes us feel relaxed or feel enthused. And that's what I've always done. I mean, I'm constantly like, I don't say a news junkie. I always am paying attention to what's going on. But every morning, and I've done this for years, and every night I will find a little space and I'll say, all right, what's my mind doing? What am I looking forward to today? What is the kind of day I'm looking forward to? And I used to do this all the time, Stu, because at one point I had a couple of offices, many people, everybody depended on me. And if I didn't shore up myself, my mindset, my emotions at the beginning of the day, then I would have an onslaught of onslaughts. So I learned how to almost become the center point of my energy. So I would say this to anybody. In the morning, if you get up a little earlier, it's so well worth it. Find your own center point. Find out what's important to you. Decide, some people like reading a lot. Other people are very spiritual and they may have some scriptures or something inspirational.
Right.
I would literally live in that space and I would go to the office early and I would make sure I established what that space felt like. And I
I love
actually
that.
created like an energy border for myself. And then what was good, my energy was always positive because people would say, Maura, we can't do it. Maura, we need a change of this. Maura, you're going to call, it was always one of those. And what happened is that I became that person of the positive energy. So people listening today, I would say the same thing. Learn how to be the focal point and the author and the creator of those things that are important to you, what you envision, what you like. And let's say you're really busy right now, but there's other things you want to do. Take that time every morning to focus in on those things that are important. And at the end of the day, go back and say, how did the day go? Was I pursuing those things where I feel free, where I felt energized, where I feel like I'm learning and exercising myself? And believe it or not, I did this international survey and I asked people how they would describe happiness. And you know what they all said? They said it's healthy relationships. So that's the whole thing with the energy. Do I have some people in my life that are toxic that maybe I don't need 100% of? That, a little bit of freedom, the ability to pursue something that's important to you or a value. And the other thing would be is that as you continue to do it, you feel confident. And I thought, isn't that really what life is all about? It's we find out what's good for our souls and we find ways to exercise it. And then before we know it, we become a bigger version, a happier version, and the energy that's expending out of us not only will do better, but then we're helping others to kind of like get there too.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. I think it's so important to learn about yourself. You know what I mean? And I think sometimes we go through life and we're like, I have a friend who when I was doing research on you, his name's Antonio Neves. And he has a book he wrote. It's called Stop Living on Autopilot. And as I was researching you and hearing some of the things you do, it's like, sometimes we do go through our life and we're just going, moving, doing, going, moving. And we don't take that moment to say like, whoa, let me check in with myself and let me ask myself, like, how are you? You know what I mean? We go around the world and we have conversations with other people. We go, oh, how are you doing? But it's like, when was the last time you asked yourself, how are you doing? And I think sometimes we need to really ask ourselves that question more because unfortunately for a decent amount of people, we may ask ourselves, how are we doing? And if we're honest with ourselves, we may go, well, you know what? I'm not super happy in my job, or I'm not, I have some relationships, like you said, that maybe aren't feeding me, but they're taking away from me. And it's so ridiculously important just to make sure you're checking in with yourself.
I'm so glad you said that. That's so true. I think most people externalize their life. It's like, what should I do? Who should I hang out with? What event should I go to? At least prior to COVID, right? But if they externalize life, but to go within, a lot of people either were never told, never stopped long enough to think about it. That's why a lot of people end up they have got like breakdowns, or they don't realize why they are drinking every night into oblivion, or they're medicated. But it's a skill set. And the thing is, the more you do it and the more you, even if it's like 5% at a time, 2% at a time, what you're doing is you're taking stock of your life. You're also taking control and you're taking authorship versus being on autopilot and having somebody else run your life.
Yeah, it's interesting too. Like I was listening to a podcast or something the other day, and it was about like becoming a monk. And when you go to become a monk, one of the first things they teach you is how do you breathe. And it's like you look at something like that and it's like, and this could be a whole nother conversation, but it's like you grow up and you don't learn how to breathe. Does someone teach you how to think? Does someone teach you, basic communication skills to share how you're feeling and what's going on in your life? It's like there's so many things that unfortunately we're not really taught as we grow up. So as you get older, you have to be very intentional about like, what are the things that I really need to learn and study to create a happy life? You know what I mean?
It's so true. It's so true. And a lot of people end up having to learn almost by default because they think, oh my gosh, I'm so miserable. Or why is it that I keep getting divorced or I can't have good relations? relationships with other people or anything that lasts. And a lot of times it's because they don't just sit back. Now you're saying even breathe. You're right.
Yeah.
Go take a walk, go to a yoga class, get on a bicycle, get a chance to connect with your soul. Because I'm telling you, a lot of people are afraid of it. They're afraid of what they might hear.
True that.
If you could listen to your soul speak, I think there'd be such a sense of peace in it, you know? Like sometimes we don't want to look in the mirror, but if we're willing to do and say, am I living a life that's authentic for me? And if you're not, and you make the change, it makes a huge difference. You know, there are pictures of me, and I've often shown this to people because I always want to talk about how what's going on the inside of you shows up on the out.
Totally. Big
Picture
time.
of me, 15 years old, and I pulled off. Somebody posted it on Facebook years ago. And the first picture, it didn't even show my face, and I thought, I know who that is. It was me at 15, and I looked and felt once I turned around like I was a 70-year-old person, stooped over, carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders because that's where I was living at the time. And I show people that even though I've had lots of changes in my life, you know, a lot of things I would have to like break through. But the interesting thing is my energy that I exude now at my age is better than what it was at 15. And then if you see a picture of me at 23 before I left law school, I was like walking zombie. I was delicious. There it was in a box. And so it's worth it. It's work. I don't want to tell people it's so easy. Just go on out and job.
Yeah, it is work.
But the work, what'll happen is that as you work from the inside out, something of life starts to manifest. And then it becomes its own sense of life. And really, every time I talk about, you know, whether it's happiness or self-development, or I love leadership, lead yourself and be a person of who knows how to lead yourself. But the point that I always try to tell people is that you will be happy with yourself in the end, and you'll help other people to be happier too. And that somewhere along the line, you end up becoming a bigger, bolder, but more relaxed person. It doesn't mean that there's arrogance. There's nothing about it. Yeah. You're actually comfortable in your own skin.
Yeah. Yeah, true that. And it's like, you know, you say, like, the truth is it is going to be work and all of that. But the reality is, like, life is work. You know what I mean? Every single day you're going to have work. It's like, you know, someone once said, like, pick your hard. Like, life's going to be hard. Pick your hard. Do you want to do the hard work of getting to know yourself and having uncomfortable conversations? Or do you want to pick the hard of going through your life every day being unhappy because you never had those conversations?
You know, that is a brilliant response, or brilliant observation, because I had a really good friend, and one day she said to me, "Oh, Maura, your way is too hard." And I knew what she was telling me, but she didn't want to do that work. But the crazy thing is, she was not in a good place, and she made a decision to stay in her unhappy life. Or I might have had to go full trip, try new things, you know, fail a few times along the way. But now, I mean, you could see, I feel so much happier as a result.
Yeah,
so
totally.
It's a matter of how you want to do it and what you want your outcomes to be.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, as let's say you decide to pick the hard of, you know, I'm going to listen to myself, I'm going to have those conversations. It's realizing, I think, as you go into that process too, because some of us, unfortunately, were, and this isn't me speaking for myself, but just working with enough people. Some people grow up in an environment where when you get quiet, you may hear some of these things that don't make you feel good. And it's realizing that as you sit in silence, or whatever this process is for you, as you get to know yourself better, realizing that, in my belief at least, the true soul that you're connecting with is going to be the one that uplifts you, the one that pushes you in a positive forward direction. And it's as you're doing that, separating okay, this is the negative crap that, like, is not who I am. This is not what's worth listening to. But let me pick apart. Maybe there's some bad things, but then there's something that's good. So let me pick that one. And then there's something bad, and there's something good. And then the next thing is, like, once you hear these good things at first, especially if you've had difficulties, the good things are going to be quieter at first, right? It's like some of the other things may be louder. The good's quieter at first. But the way that you make the good louder than the bad is you listen to the good. And you don't just listen to it, but you act on it. And it's like a simple analogy. It's almost like you're building this muscle of listening to yourself at first, right? It's like you hear this positive thing. You're like, oh, I should try this, but the bad, you know, and it's like you got to hear the good, separate the good, listen to the good, even understand it may be quiet in the beginning, but the more you do it, all of a sudden you get to the point where I'm sure you're at, where it's like now you hear the good, it's like you're in tune with it. So now you hear it and you're like, okay, let's go, let's do it.
Very true. Very, very true. I agree. That's a good analogy. And even when you were talking about like you're exercising yourself, how many people watch what they eat or they go to the gym and they're always working out, right? Like we know these things because why? We see it around us. People tell us, sign up for the gym, eat this, don't eat that. But what people don't always teach us about in life is how to listen to the voice inside of you, right? How to be quiet and how to hear what's going to work. And, I feel like I need to say this on this show today, Stu. A lot of people are afraid of listening because they're afraid of facing themselves, especially where they think they might have failed. And one of the nicest or best things people could do if they want to feel happy is learn to forgive. Sometimes they have to ask forgiveness of somebody else. Other times they have to forgive themselves. And I'm telling you, if you could learn how to do this, I learned that lesson at 9 years old, 8, 9. I realized I was holding a grudge against my mother who would not let me stay up till 9 o'clock at night for my 9th birthday. I was so furious whether I didn't want to be too polite. After a day and a half, I thought, this woman is not going to change her mind. I'm still going to have to go to bed at 8 o'clock at night. So I thought, I don't like the way I feel. I'm going to have to give up this grudge. I don't know what I called it back then.
Right.
And in an instant, I felt better. My mother didn't care, it didn't matter. But to me, it was like I felt better. So that's one of the things people are afraid to look in the mirror at themselves for or to listen. But I'm telling you, we've all made decisions. We've all done things we wish we could change.
Totally.
But we learn to forgive ourselves and forgive others and make it, I don't care who it is, I don't care what it's about, it's forgiven. That is another thing that adds to happiness, energy, and an ability to hear.
Yeah.
Right? You get rid of the voice of, oh, you rotten person. It's over.
Yeah. True. I mean, the power of forgiveness is very real. Yeah. And totally agree with you. We got to learn to forgive others, but maybe even more importantly, learn to forgive ourselves. And so, Maura, you such a wealth of knowledge, and I love we could be here all day. But I'm curious, for people that want to see what you're up to, get more of everything you're doing, where's the best place for them to find you? Yeah.
You know what I would say, since you've got a listening audience, I have a podcast, and it is my name, Maura Sweeney, Living Happy Inside Out. And what I deal with all the time is what's going on the inside. So I'm on iTunes and most popular, platforms. So Maura Sweeney, Living Happy Inside Out. I have a website, mauraforyou.com. And if there's anybody out there that wants me to come out in the flesh and seminar, they could find me anywhere on the internet. I've got anywhere on the internet, Maura Sweeney. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so last question I have for you, question we ask to all of our guests because we want to help people find direction, but do it through action, is what would you say is one thing someone listening to this can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start finding direction in their life?
I'm going to say this. When people don't have direction, they feel lost and then they feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Wherever they are, all right, I'm not going to say tell them because I'm talking to them right now. Yeah. Never see yourself as a victim. Never see yourself as a victim if you can avoid it. And it's a choice you make. No matter where you are, see yourself or envision yourself or choose to be the beneficiary. Because if you can, in any challenge, say, all right, am I going to see myself as a victim or am I going to see myself as a beneficiary? If you could choose the latter, the beneficiary, your emotions, your mind, your future all goes toward a solution, and it all goes toward the things you really want. You never want to be a victim unless, of course, you do, but you wouldn't be listening to your show.
Right. Yeah.
If you choose beneficiary, I could tell you, I used to do this in corporate. Sometimes I didn't know the answer to something. It's like, okay, whatever this is, it's going to work out for good. And that's what a beneficiary is. So I'm in the wrong job. Well, guess what? I'm going to be such a beneficiary about this because I'm going to find my way to the right thing. So that's it. Choose always in your head to be the beneficiary, and that will help as a guide.
Yeah. Love it, love it, love it. Well, Maura, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Absolutely phenomenal to connect with you, and just thank you for pouring out your heart and your wisdom and, everything that you do.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun, Stu.
Absolutely.